Karen. Thank you. Did all of you get a copy of this when you came in? This little sheet here that basically contains the Declaration of Independence minus the 28 complaints against the king. The most important question that we have to answer in any election cycle, particularly the election cycle that we're dealing with right now, is what is the purpose of government? I dare you to ask every candidate that asks you for a vote, asks you to contribute to their campaign, asks for your help in any way, shape, or form, to ask him that question: what is the purpose of government? And I've done that. It's a fascinating little experiment because you get all kinds of answers back, but the real answer is what they said here in the Declaration of Independence. Let's look at it. These words are pretty familiar to us. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Now here comes the important presuppositions that answer the question, what's the purpose of civil government? Number one, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Notice what he said there, men are created equal. Oh, I guess I can't get too close to that. That's this view over here of government. The creation is the foundation of it all, and it's because we're created equal that we have, as it's going to go on to say, rights from that creator. Secondly, they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's not an exhaustive list. That's just starting the list of our God-given rights. So he's saying there is a creator, and secondly, he's saying our rights come from the creator. Now notice the third thing he states there very clearly, that to secure these rights, what rights? The rights that come from the creator, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's actually making the fourth point there. It must be by consent of the governed. That is, if the governed do not consent to Obamacare, they should not have to tolerate Obamacare. It should not be part of the government if the governed do not consent to it. And then finally, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it's the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. So if we were to summarize the three things that he's saying here very clearly, first of all, there is a creator God. This is foundational to the philosophy of government of our founders. And again, if it's foundational, it's curious that most people won't talk about it. They don't want to mention it. It's like, oh, we'll get into a debate here, we'll get into a fight. Well, let's not talk about the foundation being the creator. Instead, they'll talk about all sorts of other things. We have this agreement among ourselves as to what this government's going to be, and we can change it by this means or that means. No, there is a creator, and that creator has given us rights. So our rights are God-given. They're not given to us by civil government. That's the difference between God-given rights, which is the founders' belief, and what we are told today, you have civil rights. I understand the whole civil rights movement has some proper things built into it, but the very title of it is wrong. It's wrong because civil rights are given to you by the civil government. And if the government gives rights to you, what can they do? Take them away. So they said, oh, you thought you had a right to purchase whatever health care you want. We decide you don't have that right anymore. We're going to take that right away from you because, after all, we gave it to you. We could take it from you. Our founders said, no. That's not a proper understanding at all. In fact, that's the philosophy of King George III, the divine right of kings, because the law is whatever the king says it is. Whatever comes out of his pen or out of his tongue, that's the law. Our founder said, no. He is subject to the law that's greater than himself, and that's the law of the Creator. The Creator has given us rights. The only reason the king or human civil government exists at all is to secure those God-given rights, the right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to property. Think about the right to property for just a moment. How many of you are familiar with the Supreme Court case, Kelo v. New London? How many of you have heard of that case, Kelo v. New London, in which the Supreme Court essentially said, in America today, you can no longer own property outright. The government can take that property anytime it wants from you and do whatever it pleases with it, including selling it to somebody who's going to give them a higher tax revenue than you happen to be giving the government. So the government really owns the property, and you just happen to be the renter. And you know what happens if you don't pay your annual rent to the government. What happens? They come and take it. Why do they take that property? They claim it's theirs, and you got to pay rent, and you got to abide by all the rules that they set up for what you can do and what you can't do on the property that supposedly you paid for and that you own. What's going on here? Our right to property, which actually is part of that phrase there, the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness includes the right to own and control the property that you own. So you look at the very foundation of why our government was established in the first place, and you find that that foundation has been shifted away. And most Americans today think, government exists to provide us welfare and food stamps and whatever, and health care, so they vote because they believe they're going to get something more from government than government's going to cost them. But we all know that that doesn't work. When the government takes something, it can only take something from someone. It has nothing. In fact, government produces absolutely nothing. Think about it. Does the policeman produce anything? Does the politician in Annapolis produce anything? They are takers, they are not producers. And so we, the producers, those who actually do something in society and produce something productive, we ought to have a say about what they take, how much they take, and what they do with what they take. And the agreement that we have formed with our civil government to determine what they can do and what they can't do in order to protect our God-given rights are called our Constitution. And not only the U.S. Constitution, but here's a copy of a book that most legislators in Annapolis never look at, the Maryland State Constitution. They take an oath. Anybody that wins an office in any level of government in Maryland, whether at the county level or the state level, they take an oath, which means they swear before Almighty God, endangering their immortal soul. They swear that they're going to abide by this document, because this document is our contract. We, the people of the state of Maryland, have a contract with our civil government. When was the last time you went to the auto mechanic? I was there today dropping off a vehicle, and when you go to the auto mechanic, you sign a contract, right? They won't let you out of the building without signing a document, and that document has some fine print there, and if you don't bother to read the fine print, it might come up and hit you upside the head. But if you read the fine print, you know what contract you're entering into with that auto mechanic. So I dropped it off to get the oil changed. And I come back tomorrow to pick it up, and he's changed the transmission, and now he's going to charge me $5,000 to get my vehicle back. So wait a minute. Let me pull that contract out that I didn't read and look at the fine. You can't do that. You have no permission. This contract governs what you can do as my auto mechanic and what you cannot do. And if you violate that contract, I have legal recourse. I can take you to court and sue you because you violated the contract I have with you. Well, our Constitution, both U.S. and state Constitution, is the contract that we, the people, have formed with our government. Why do we have a government out of control in Washington, D.C.? And I would submit to you we have a government out of control in Annapolis, Maryland as well. And perhaps even in your county. I've seen it in my county council in Anne Arundel County, a government completely out of control, not following the charter that they have sworn an oath to uphold and not following the Maryland Constitution and so on. Why do we have a government out of control? Because most of the parties to that contract have not bothered to read the fine print. In a sense, we've just signed off and said, okay, as a citizen, I trust these guys. I elect them, and I let them go. They go down to Washington, they go to Annapolis, they go to the county council, and then they do whatever they want to do. And I've never looked at the fine print, which is why we're losing liberty in America today. And I would contend the only way we're going to restore liberty, the first step to restore liberty, is to use the tools of liberty that our founders gave us. That is the U.S. Constitution and our state constitution. We have got to know these documents. We have got to know them better than the people who go to Annapolis and the people who go to Washington, because we've got to hold them accountable. But if we don't know these documents, they go down there and they do whatever they please, and they get reelected and reelected. Why? Because they hand out goodies. And after all, who wants to vote against Santa Claus? If he's handing out goodies year after year after year, everybody's going to continue to vote for Santa Claus. That is, if they're on the receiving end of Santa Claus, rather than Santa Claus stealing goods from other people to give it to these children over here. This side of the room, we're going to steal from you. We're going to give it to this side of the room. Nah. If you're on that side of the room, you're going to realize it's a bad deal. But the fact of the matter in America today is the majority of people are on this side of the room, on the receiving end. I understand more than 45% of people receive some form of welfare in America today, just at the federal level. That's not counting the state welfare or county welfare rolls. No, just at the federal level, 45% of American households are receiving some aid. And so what are they going to vote for? More of that. Instead of following the documents that we are to hold our elected officials accountable to. So at Institute on the Constitution, we know that liberty can be restored only when we start to understand these founding documents, which includes the Declaration of Independence, it includes our U.S. Constitution, it includes our Bill of Rights at the federal level. But those things only restrict what the federal government can and cannot do. They tell it can and cannot do in the Bill of Rights. Second Amendment, what it can and cannot do. And some states would claim, well, hey, the Bill of Rights, that applies to the federal government, doesn't apply to the state of Maryland, therefore we can restrict guns any way we choose. No, because our Constitution of Maryland, if you know what it says in Declaration of Rights, Article 28, for example, and in Article 9, you know that it says a state militia is absolutely necessary to have a free state in contrast with a tyrannical state. So when O'Malley and company were passing their egregious gun grabbing and gun violating bills, they were in violation of this Constitution. I spoke at several different events trying to point out the fact that Declaration of Rights, Article 22, Article 9 of the body of the Constitution, both make it plain they cannot legally do what they have done. They have violated their oath of office. The result should be they're impeached at the executive level. They're removed from office, both in the House of Delegates and the Senate. But that hasn't happened because the majority of Marylanders do not know the details of this document, and they therefore do not know the contract. They're walking into their auto mechanic blind, and their auto mechanic says, you need a whole new engine here. We're going to replace the engine. We're going to charge you for it. Oh, you can't pay for it? Well, we'll charge you interest on it. And while we're at it, we'll give you a loaner card, but the loaner card, we're going to charge you $100 a day. We're going to charge you whatever we want because you don't know the details of the contract. So my encouragement, if we want to restore liberty, is we've got to go back and use the liberty tools that our founders gave us. We need to understand the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence. We need to understand the Maryland Constitution. I would argue that the Maryland Constitution is actually a more powerful document for us because we have a tyrannical government in Annapolis that's not obeying this document at all. I can't tell you the number of times in the past 15 years, every year I go down and testify on some bill or a number of bills in Annapolis to committees on the Senate side or committees on the House side. And the delegates and the senators, they don't know this document. They have no idea. And so when I open it up and quote it, they have never heard these words. Sometimes they're hearing them for the very first time. I remember one time testifying, and after testifying, I went out in the hall, and a couple of the delegates followed me out of the committee room. And they asked me, where can I get a copy of the Maryland State Constitution? I said, please, take my copy. I'll get another copy, but please take my copy. You mean you swore an oath to this document that you've never opened and you don't know anything about its contents? That's exactly what they've done. And the fact of the matter is they get away with that because the Maryland citizens don't hold them accountable. You ought to be asking anyone who's running for office in Maryland, do they know the 47 Declaration of Rights? Can they tell you what the 28th says, that a well-regulated militia is the proper and natural defense of a free government? And ask them, what does it mean? What's a well-regulated militia? Do we have a well-regulated militia in Maryland? And if we don't, are you going to do something if you go to Annapolis about establishing a well-regulated militia in Maryland? Because if you know what our founder said the militia is, all the able-bodied people. In fact, I'm looking at the militia right here. All of you, unless you're not a citizen of Maryland, you're part of the Maryland militia. But you know what? You've been disarmed by the governor who says it's now a criminal act to have this on your person. That's a 17 clip, and he says that's illegal. I'm violating the law by carrying this, a $5,000 penalty, and I forget how much time in prison for just carrying this, but I carry it because I want to challenge any police officer that comes up to me and say, you're going to arrest me? Let me ask you, police officer, did you take an oath to the Maryland Constitution? Did you take an oath to the U.S. Constitution? Do you know what the Second Amendment says? Do you know what the Declaration of Rights, Article 28 says? Do you know Article 9 of the body of the Maryland Constitution? Excuse me, sir, you're going to arrest me falsely because you took an oath, and let me warn you, because as a pastor, I have a job to warn those who violate their oaths, that you took an oath before Almighty God. That is, you swore something that you were going to do, that you were going to be held accountable on Judgment Day before Him. And if you arrest me, sir, You are violating your oath of office, and I am here to warn you right here and right now that you're going to stand before your Creator on Judgment Day, and you're going to have to give an account for this action right now where you are violating your oath of office. You can go ahead and arrest me, but if you do, I am warning you, you cannot stand before Almighty God on Judgment Day and tell Him no one ever warned you of the hell to pay if you violated your oath of office, because I'm warning you right here, right now, and this is on record, and the Creator is going to bring this record back to your attention on Judgment Day. Now, you willing to go ahead and arrest me? You going to do that, mister? We need to challenge everyone in Maryland that takes an oath to fulfill that oath. But again, we can only do that if we know the contents of these documents. These are tools for liberty, tools for freedom, and that's why I encourage you to get a host kit. You could start a club or a meeting that's part of this club that would teach U.S., Maryland. And by the way, the other course, the jury course that Karen mentioned, you have enormous power as a juror that I guarantee you will never be told that you have in the state of Maryland. When you go to serve for jury duty, they're going to tell you, the judge will give you the law, and he'll tell you what the law is. And you are to abide by whatever the judge tells you the law is. You just determine the facts. And that's an amazing statement that you'll hear, because our Maryland Constitution says the exact opposite. Article 23 of our Declaration of Rights, let me read it so I don't miss any words that it says. In the trial of all criminal cases, so it's dealing with criminal cases, the jury shall be the judges of law as well as of fact. That is, as a juror, you are to sit first in judgment of the law and say, is this law constitutional? If David Whitney was arrested for having a 17 clip on his person, if he was arrested for that and he's brought to trial, the jury is to say, is that law that says it's illegal for him to have that, is that law lawful? Well, you say, wait a minute. The legislature spilled ink on a piece of paper. The governor signed that ink that they spilled on paper, and the judges all say that that ink on paper is law. Oh, no, it's not. Why? Because this is the supreme law of the state of Maryland, and it says the jury in all criminal cases judges the law as well as the fact. You won't be told that by any judge in Maryland. In fact, you won't be told that by any lawyer in Maryland, because they're threatened with disbarment if they tell you the truth of what this document says. So they are all criminally in violation of the law. But you won't hear that, which is why you need to take the jury course so you're equipped to be able to do your duty. You see, we have the tools to restore liberty in the state of Maryland. And I know many people look at Maryland and say, oh, it's a lost cause, it's gone too far, it's a no, it's not. You and I can restore, but it's going to take using these liberty tools, which is why I encourage you to get a hold of these tools and learn these things and spread this message to as many people as you can. Thank you so much for your attention.